Hello, everybody, and welcome to ConTinual. I'm your host, Jeanne Adams, and tonight we're talking about thrillers and police procedurals. Tonight we're going to talk about these fabulous books, ours and other people's, and why we love the genre. And I'm going to start by asking our wonderful panelists to introduce themselves, starting with LaQuette.
Hi, I'm LaQuette. I write mostly contemporary romance with a little bit of suspense thrown in, featuring diverse characters. My work is generally very dramatic and very sexy. So if you open up a book of mine, please understand what you're getting yourself into.
Well. All right.
KJ Howe.
So hi, I'm KJ Howe, and I've been studying kidnapping for the last 6 years. And I've created a character, Thea Paris, who's an elite kidnap negotiator and travels all around the world bringing hostages back home. I also decided to have her be type 1 diabetic. And the reason for that is I feel like there's not enough representation in fiction of physical disabilities. And I really want to do something a little bit different. But let me tell you that diabetes does not slow Thea down.
And they're awesome. Bobby?
Hi, I'm Bobby Nash. I write all kinds of genres and various things, but thrillers seem to be the thing I come back to the most. I really like the action thrillers, the crime thrillers, where there's gunplay and violence and running and jumping and all that stuff. So yes, that's fun. I get a kick out of doing all that stuff.
Okay, Layla.
Hi, I'm Layla Reyne. I write LGBTQ romance and romantic suspense. And so most of my romantic suspense involves LEOs, typically FBI agents, though I have some mobsters and assassins too, and those are always fun because the rules go out the window. But I love to read it, love to write suspense thriller, things that keep me turning the page. And if I'm turning them till 3 a.m. in the morning, that's all the better.
Absolutely. I was turning LaQuette's latest till about 4 a.m. Thanks for that. Not. I loved it, but I was like, oh my Lord, it's 4 a.m. Yeah. Okay, which one? Gary, what about you?
Hi, I'm Gary Phillips. I guess I mostly write hard-boiled crime fiction, but certainly in the context of that, and I've written books usually, or I should say usually, I've written private eye novels, but I've also written novels from the point of view of the criminal. Usually it's like a professional thief. But in that, I've had to then learn something about police procedure because, of course, my character is trying to elude the police. And I think Bobby and I will probably get into this a little bit later, but I was very happy to write a kind of novella, a heist novella, which definitely has some suspense and thriller elements to it for Bobby in his world of the Snows. But Bobby will talk about that a little later. But it's called Thieves Alley.
Cool. John?
I write classic hardcore thrillers. I write the kind of thrillers that I loved since I was a kid. Basically, whether I'm writing my Caitlin Strong series or whether I'm writing the Capital Crime series, which I've taken over, I have the thing I do, or I try to do, first and foremost, is make it impossible for you to put the book down. Mm-hmm. Every chapter has a cliffhanger at the end, and every chapter opens with a hook. Mm-hmm. In other words, I write the kind of books I would read if someone else had written them, to quote Robert Louis Stevenson.
I love that. I love that all of you have kept me up. At least once you have kept me up. So thank you for that.
Not many women say that about me. I want that on the record. I mean, but that's okay. That's all right.
Yeah, 2 shows nightly, folks. Be here always.
So what drew you to writing these kind of books? I'm going to start with you, Bobby. What drew you to writing, hard-boiled kind of detective stories and chase thrillers and, the race to the finish kind of book?
Mainly it's because that's the kind of stuff I like to read. I enjoy reading those kind of things. I also enjoy those kind of TV shows and movies as well.
Right.
So there's kind of that cross media thing there that, it's just, there's something exciting about a good car chase, or, having to chase the, even if it's not a literal like foot chase, but like going after and trying to catch the bad guys, and or if you're the good guy or the bad guy trying to get away from the good guy. There's just something fun about that, seeing both sides and how they're trying to one up the other to get away or to catch them. And it's fun. Plus, yeah, I like action. I like shooting and fighting and not in real life, because I'm usually on the losing end of that in real life. But in my books, my characters can be the badass that I wish I could be, in real life. But yeah, no, it's so it's fun playing with those characters who live those kind of lives.
Yeah.
And it always starts with the characters. So meeting characters or creating characters that can do that kind of stuff, and seeing what drives them is, I got a big kick out of that.
LaQuette, what drew you to putting suspense in your stories?
Like Bobby, I like a lot of suspense or police procedural TV shows. So, the original Law and Order was my absolute favorite thing to watch. I was devastated when it finally went off air.
20 years.
Yeah, there were 25 years. There was nothing like watching Jack McCoy get his guy or gal.
So true.
Like you always knew it. You knew he was going to get the villain, or the person responsible for the crime. And he was just tenacious enough that he was, he'd always get this close to crossing a line just to get what he, get to the truth. And I like to kind of add that to my romances, because it's just another layer of tension for the couple to have to address.
Yeah.
And it also complicates the relationship in particular ways, because oftentimes there is, there may be an ethical line that's being crossed by one of the law enforcement officers or agents getting involved with possibly either a suspect or someone they're supposed to be protecting, as is the case in Jackson with Jackson and Ada.
Such a good book.
Thank you.
John, what about you? What drew you to this? Are you? Is it the TV?
I was just thinking, and I loved what both Bobby and LaQuette just said, because it made me realize, and I've never said this in a show or an interview before, but the greatest, sure, there were great books that made me want to be a thriller writer, great writers like Clive Cussler, David Morrell, Robert Ludlum, Stephen King. Those were the authors I read when I was in college that made me realize what I wanted to do with my life. But before then, and even now, the primary influences in who I am as a pop culture person, as someone, because books occupy a space in pop culture. They're not on an island, they're part of movies and TV. I grew up on the Sean Connery, James Bond movies, and I went to see them over and over and over again. And I tell people that that's the greatest influence in my career, because I started out, and to an extent, I'm still writing world domination, same old plan. To quote James Bond, Sean Connery, and Dr. No, as is Jim Rollins, as is Steve Berry, as is Clive Cussler, as is just about all of us in the genre. In the 70s, as I tried to grow up a little bit, movies were the greatest form of entertainment. Movies like Dirty Harry, Deliverance, The Godfather, The Conversation. I watched those movies and saw them as great stories. I wanted to be a storyteller, as good a storyteller as the people who were telling those stories. Now, in my older years, in my middle age, TV has replaced movies as the greatest pop culture writing that there is. I take my inspiration from shows like Ozark, now on which is just the best writing on television since Breaking Bad. shows like Stranger Things. Some of the Law and Order, the original Law and Order SVU. I never got into the other ones. The great writing on shows like ER and St. Elsewhere, because ultimately we are storytellers. Sure, we're writers, we write books, but we have to be able to tell a great story. So my inspiration, in addition to coming from the authors I emulate and idolize, my inspiration continues to come from, and I want to get to this because I think streaming series are very important, because now you can consume TV the way you consume a book, at your own pace.
Yeah.
And that's why I have been so inspired by some of the, by the great TV, this golden age, the second golden age of television that we've entered.
It's really wonderful because there's so many outlets for an author or a creator's work. It's really fabulous. What got you into it, KJ?
Well, I kind of have a theory that we're connected to the different types of genres in fiction by the emotions that they elicit. For example, a lot of romance novelists are really attracted to the hope of love, the hope of a happily ever after ending. Mystery writers can be connected to logic and puzzle solving. Science fiction, more wonder and awe at something that can happen. And when it comes to thrillers, I think the authors are very much connected to excitement and adrenaline. And that's definitely my background. I've traveled extensively all my life, and I'm very drawn to adventure. And so for me, I was immediately drawn to the thriller genre because it really spoke to me and provided that adrenaline boost.
Yeah, the page turn. Yeah. Layla, what about you?
I think sort of a little bit of what everyone said, right? Like I grew up more on television than I did in books. And so I come from that too, of having watched, Hill Street Blues and other great shows that were just, that's what I watched. My mom let me stay up way past bedtime. So, I got to watch the 10 o'clock shows. But a lot of that, and I think one of the things that I love about thriller movies and about thrillers in books, and also when you look at romantic suspense, I love an opening, right? I love the opening scene of a movie, of a books, especially if it grabs, right? Like, and it's an action scene right from the go. I love being dropped into action. I know that's not everyone's favorite thing. But you were mentioning James Bond, that action scene where they're in Milan and he's, they're driving right from or Siena, I think. And they're driving and there's a car chase right from the get-go. I adore that scene. It's also like our test scene for every, stereo system we set up. But, like, I just love being dropped into action. To what KJ said, it hits that adrenaline button. And that adrenaline button just keeps going the entire book, the entire movie. If it's romance, it's that thread. And like LaQuette said, it's also that extra conflict that I think keeps characters from getting too in their head. I can't deal with something that's completely all in a character's head. But when you have both the external and the internal pushing each other, right? It's moving the story along and it's flipping those pages.
Yeah.
So.
And I think when it's especially fun when you have a cerebral character who then is forced to get out of their head and stay on their feet. That's super fun.
Right. Or like when their partner is that person, right? Like I wrote a character where he's the professor and he's very kind of much in his head and in his classroom. And then he has to go out in the field. Thanks. Right. He has to go out in the field with this guy who's an undercover agent who's just completely flies by the seat of his pants. And right, so they've got to figure out how to work, and it does force him out of his comfort zone. It's a lot of fun to play with too. So as an author,
yeah. Gary, what about you? What drew you to this craziness?
Well, no, I think as people have talked about, I was thinking about. To me, there's like these sort of two kinds of thrillers, right? So there's, there's the lead child. I guess now his brother is taking over the series, but the lead child, Jack Reacher books, right? And so Reacher's clearly this capable guy, right? He's 6'4", he's ex-military, he's got skills, and he and the setup for the books are that he stumbles into these situations, and then he has to deal, right? And he doesn't carry with him. He's not, he's not carrying with him a whole arsenal. A lot of times he's got a t-shirt on and his toothbrush, right? But clearly he has to draw on his skill set. He draws on his environment to handle the situation, right? So that's kind of, to me, that's like sort of one kind of thriller, right? And those they build and they build and they build. And I guess even to some extent, I suppose James Patterson in his books, which are very cleverly done, right? Because I think, as John pointed out, they start with a hook and they end on a cliffhanger. And they're short, brief chapters, and each one builds on the other. And sometimes he'll shift, right? He'll go from first person with Cross, and then he'll go to third person with the villain or whatever is the external enemy. But those characters are under pressure, and that's what we respond to. And then I was thinking of, like, there's this great film, or great little film by Michael Mann called Collateral, right? Where
a gorgeous movie.
Right,
God, it's a
right.
gorgeous movie.
Where Tom Cruise is this hitman come to town to work his list, right? And we know, or we learn, and well, of course, Tom Cruise knows that at the end of it, he's going to kill Jamie Foxx's character, the cab driver who's forced to drive him around. But it's really the cab driver's story, because he, in the end, as he gets hip to what's going on, here's this normal guy, this just a normal everyday working class guy, and now he's got to contend with this monumental force, this threat that's been thrust upon him. And I think that is what we respond to, because we're Jamie Foxx, we're that guy, we're that person who's like,
Right.
Who doesn't have these skill sets, who doesn't have this background. And now we've been forced into the situation. And what is it that we do? Do we fall apart, or do we try to call on whatever it is we can call on, to try to save ourselves and maybe even save somebody else? And I think that's I think that, to me, that's such a great trope, such a great way that you've constructed this thriller that pulls us in and really makes us root for this character as he goes along. And he's not ex-military, he's not a vet, he's not none of those things. And all he is just this normal person who has now found himself in this extraordinary situation.
Right. Well, since you bring it up that way, I'm going to start back with you. Although I do have to say the caveat that the best assassin movie has got to be Grosse Point Blank. But
I love that movie. I can never.
I wouldn't call that one a thriller, though.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't turn it off if it's on.
I can't either.
I can't. It's just open.
Let me start with you, Gary, and ask, what do you think? I mean, obviously, John mentioned, Ludlum, and who does not hold up after you because of the technology. It's hard to go back and read Ludlum.
Right.
Because of the changes in technology, a lot of the older books and movies don't hold up as well. Bond being one that does a little bit, because Q made gadgets that were at the time crazy. Right now we're like, oh yeah, exactly. That stuff.
Right.
But what do you think is keeping our genre fresh? Obviously, we all still have the problem of, if we're using today's technology, at some point it's going to be obsolete. But there are so many books that still manage to keep it fresh and keep it hardcore, moving fast, turning the pages. What do you think keeps it fresh?
Well, of course, Jeanne, as you say, I mean, there's a whole subgenre of the techno thriller, right? That so there's that, right? There was that. What was his name? Was it Craig Thomas? He wrote those books. Like, one of them was made as a Clint Eastwood movie where he has to steal this super advanced jet plane.
Oh, right, Firefly.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, Bob. Yeah, exactly. But it still had those kind of elements. But you're right. But listen, in the end, we all know it's the characters. Whoever those characters are, whoever we put in motion, whatever their background is, whatever it is we reveal about them. The reason the reader stays with us, I think, in the end, is not because of the crazy tech, or not because of all the pyrotechnics you can put on the page, but I think it's because we give you something about that. The character works because there's some kind of human through line in the character. Even even in Rambo, Rambo just wanted peace and quiet, right? Everybody's just messing with him. I mean, at least in the original. In first, but everybody's just messing with him. But all he wants, man, is just peace and quiet. That's all. It's not like a big deal. But
we can certainly all relate to that.
But everybody keeps effing with him. Not to you, yeah. So, but but we can all relate to that. So that's what I think you're right works. I mean, but once you do get, I think you can get carried away, right? If you get too much pyrotechnics, if you get, I mean, like, listen, don't get me wrong. I like a Fast and Furious movie. But I'll be, despite the fact that they just defy the laws of physics and defy credibility, but they're just entertaining. But whoever thought this, the original B movie about gearheads who were car thieves in Echo Park, here in LA, would become this massive whatever this thing has become, right?
I know, it's crazy, right?
It's crazy. And I think honestly, they're entertaining, but I think they've lost their soul. Whereas if you look at that first film, you go back and look at that first movie, that movie has heart.
Oh yeah,
it's about
totally.
These people. It's about their world. It's about their little society.
And that was a very fresh concept at the
time.
That
was a very fresh concept, exactly. Yeah. Well, it's kind of reviving this, Roger Corman B kind of movie thing.
Yeah.
But giving it this new spin. But you felt those characters now, and I just watched the other one. Was it Hobbs and Shaw, where Idris Elba gets superpowers? It becomes kind of like Luke Cage. I mean, it's hilarious, but it's entertaining. But to me, it has no heart. There's nothing to grab onto. There's nothing to latch onto there. So yes,
it's become more about the stunts.
That's right, exactly right, Bob. It's become more about how outrageous can we get? Now, don't get me wrong. If Hollywood came tomorrow and said, Gary, we're going to pay you $3 million to write Fast and Furious meets Transformers, I'm your boy. I'm writing it.
Absolutely.
You forget everything I said about no heart. As long as you paying me, baby, I'll give you cars turned into robots in the middle of the freeway. Don't worry about it. I got it. I'm on it.
Yeah.
But to answer the question, yes, it's always about the characters, right? It's always about. There's got to be something that we as the reader, we as the audience latches on to, that we can identify with, because you're right. Otherwise, it is just about the stunts. It's just about the pyrotechnics, and that's fine. You could have that, but that's
nothing wrong with a good movie where
nothing
shit
wrong
blows up.
Exactly, nothing wrong with it. But if you want to, have a little something that resonates after, that last page of the book is turned, you got to give us some characters that have some heart.
Gary, what Gary just said about Transformers, I loved the first Transformers. And I absolutely loved it because I'd never really known anything about it. And the reason I loved it was twofold. One, it's when Don Murphy, who created Transformers, a producer that I hope to be working with on a project very soon. Don said, what do you account for the success of Transformers? And he said absolutely the opposite of what people expected him to say. He said, because at its heart, it's a movie about the greatest love affair in the world, a boy in his first car.
There you go. Yeah.
And what I add to that is I was at Transformers and I felt like a little kid again.
Right.
I watched Game of Thrones and I looked forward to it so much in April for so many years at 9 o'clock on HBO. Only show I didn't DVR. I had to watch it when it was on. I didn't want any spoilers because it made me feel like I was an 8-year-old boy or a 7-year-old boy in Jason and the original Jason and the Argonauts.
Right.
When the Colossus of Rhodes steps down off his pedestal and stop motion animation, he's moving like this, but it's magical.
Right.
The first movie I ever saw as a little boy was 101 Dalmatians.
There you go.
And I think everything I've written fiction-wise in my career is basically a retelling of 101 Dalmatians. Has there ever been a greater villain than Cruella de Vil?
If that was your favorite movie, please go read the book, because the movie has nothing on the book. I was actually just discussing that with somebody the other day. The book is fabulous. So what has even more heart. And Cruella is even crazier. So
I think the enduring nature of thrillers is based on the fact that they represent the core of what storytelling is. a big terrible thing that's going to happen, and one or two people who can, or the only ones who can stop it.
Yeah.
Like,
Now,
how
I
do you
think,
stop so the point being, we feel like kids again.
well, and I think too that, and I want to go to LaQuette with this one, and then Layla after her, because for those of us who write romantic suspense, I think there's really that impact of the ordinary person thrown into the extraordinary situation. And LaQuette, I'd especially like you to speak to this because your involvement in RWA. We really, as a genre, we've never really lapsed. I mean, some of the genres have kind of ebbed and flowed, but romantic suspense really stays pretty strong. And, you know, what do you think helps us keep it fresh, LaQuette?
I think every time you put people on a page, I write, you know, I'm listening to you all talk about tech and all these things. There's very little tech in my books. And not, you know, other than what we normally use at this time, a cell phone or, you know, a laptop or something like that. But I don't usually get crazy with it because, quite frankly, my focus is always the characters. I write character-driven stories. And so it's every story I write, no matter whether it's romantic suspense or just plain old contemporary, is always focused on the emotional evolution of the characters individually, but also collectively as a union. And how do I, you know, how do they get from these two separate people to, you know, a union at the end? How do we get these individuals to become one while still maintaining their individuality? So it's for me, it's all about seeing how one character complements the other, right? So for people who meet my husband, they're like, oh my gosh, he's so mellow compared to you. I'm like, it's necessary because he keeps me calm, right? He balances me. I'm all over here doing all this, and he's like, okay, that's just a bit much for me. Can we just bring it in?
Yeah.
And so he literally keeps me grounded in a lot of ways. And so when I write romance, I'm looking for characters who in some way balance each other. With Jackson, he is very much that stoic, grumpy, you know, hero. And Asia is just like extra. She is everything. And he doesn't know how to deal with that, especially because his job is to protect her because people are trying to kill her and she's not taking it seriously. Like to her, it's like, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. I'm not going to let anyone stop me from accomplishing this goal that I have.
Right.
And how does someone who is used to their lives being very regimented, you know, and rule bound and always following the rules, how does this individual deal with this woman who just, you know, she's a light of, you know, she's all sunshine, but she's also very, very passionate, and he cannot account for it, and he also can't course correct because of it. Sure. And that's kind of what I think keeps readers on the page, is because they never know what lane she's going to drag him down for, you know, whatever is going on. And they also never know how he's going to temper her, because he does in certain ways temper her as the story, you know, gets further along. But that, to me, that's what it is. It's that push and pull between the characters that makes readers want to see. Because I don't think, for me anyway, I don't think they're really reading it for the action. I think it's more about how the external is impacting their emotional state.
Right.
And how do they overcome that and still connect with one another?
Right. The extraordinary situation thing. Yeah. Layla, for you, it's different because your assassins are by very nature already in the stew, but yet you manage to make those stories fresh. How do you think we keep the genre fresh from your perspective?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, you know, and touching on the fact that I tend to have a police procedural aspect. There's a crime being solved, you know, there's a problem nugget, so to speak, that they have to solve, right? And it there's usually one per book, and then there's an overarching series problem, right? And that's the external problem, and that is tied to whatever the personal problem is, right? To what LaQuette was talking about, right? Like, it's so tied in with the character, and that's, at least for romantic suspense, if we're doing it correctly, we want to see both of them progressing, right? And to the point about balance, you know, when I think about the ones I've written, to me, the most successful is Craft Brew. And that's because, you know, you had Cam, who was an FBI agent, who he was solving he is a specialist in kidnapping. And because his sister was kidnapped when he was a teenager under his watch. And so that case comes back around, right? It's the case he's never solved. It's the thing he has to solve. And he is normally, you know, one of the best agents. And here's an emotional, like, this is not something he can tuck away.
It's out of the ordinary.
It's out of the ordinary for him. And his love interest is a federal prosecutor. And, you know, he helps ground him by, okay, let's build the case, right? Like, let me ask the question. I'm here for you emotional support wise too, but let me ask, let's deal with the problem nugget, right? And help you, you know, deal with that as a way of focusing all of that emotional energy that's out here right now, and solve the case. So,
right.
Yeah.
Bobby, what do you think keeps it fresh and popular?
I still think I agree with what has been said here too. I mean, the characters are the key. I mean, if you think about it, like when you read a series, or if you watch a TV series or a series of movies, there are going to be stories that you don't love as much as others in it. But what keeps you coming back is, I love these characters. And so I can sit through a story that I don't like because I love these characters and seeing what they're doing and how they're. So I think when your readers fall in love with your characters, they will follow you through ups and downs, you know, because I'd like to think everything I write's a home run, but you know, we sometimes miss. But yeah, so that's where I always start from is, you know, what are the characters doing? And then you trip them up with the plot or whatever that way. And then also you mentioned technology. Technology can, I think, makes us, especially writing crime, those type of things. I think technology requires us to look at stories differently, like plots. Like if you watched TV or read a book in the 70s, the plot could simply be the detective has discovered that there's going to be an assassination attempt on the other side of town. And the story is him getting from one end of town to the other in time to stop it.
Well, I mean, like, that's not even the 70s. That's In the Line of Fire, right?
Yeah.
That was 90s.
Yeah.
Right? He had to stop the assassination.
Yeah. But whereas now that's a much harder plot because we've all got these things and
ATM cams
and no service. Readers don't buy that anymore. That's just, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, you have to come up with clever ways to do those things. And so I think sometimes that makes us come up with to use old plots, but come up with creative new ways to do them. And, you know, I try not to, you know, I mean, I don't invent technology, but, you know, like LaQuette said, you know, they have cell phones, you know, they have laptops, you know, they have DVRs, they have that kind of stuff. If I've got it, they've got it. So you just have to kind of work around that. But yeah, but I'm not writing like James Bond types characters who have to have stuff, you know, that don't exist yet. So that helps.
Well, and going to you, KJ, I think that for you, I mean, you've got these central characters that people fall in love with. So what everybody else has been saying is really applies to what you're writing, because, you know, it's the characters we come back for Thea. But what do you think in general keeps the genre fresh? Obviously, I mean, your stories are very fresh and different because of the angle you've taken. But how do you think it's changing and staying fresh?
Sure. Well, there's a couple points, I think. First of all, I think to choose a world that you're incredibly passionate about. And like I mentioned earlier, that I've been studying kidnapping for 6 years and meeting some of the top kidnap negotiators in the world and diving into that and building an entire world, just like we do in science fiction or fantasy, but making it unique so that when people come to the book, hopefully they're entertained, but also educated. And I love learning when I pick up a book and really get engrossed in that. But I think a finer point on that is voice. And I don't know if you guys have had the opportunity to read Blacktop Wasteland by S.A. Cosby, but it's one of the best books I've read in a very long time. And what really stands out for me with Sean's book is his voice. It's so distinctive, it's so unique, and it's so powerful. I could not put that book down. And I think that, you know, let's face it, guys, there's only so many plots out there, and you can do fresh takes. And, you know, like I thought to myself when I created Thea that there was a lot of like Jack Reacher, Jack Ryan, and, you know, very strong male protagonists, but there really wasn't a female like that in action adventure. So I thought that would be something different. But like I said, but going back to Sean's book, I mean, he takes us to a world he knows intimately well. And I felt like I became, you know, immersed in Beau's character, and I went on that ride literally with him. And I think that voice is key. And another person that does that exceptionally well is Nelson DeMille with the John Corey character. So I just feel like voice can just turn up the notch on the quality of your writing.
Yeah.
I also think too, one of the great things that I've discovered is being able to do the research and going out and meet people that do what I have my fake character, you know, my own characters do. You know, I've talked with FBI agents and SWAT team leaders and Secret Service agents. And
it's one of the joys of our job.
Yeah, but it's not only learning the job of what they do, but it's seeing how they as people react, because these are very dangerous jobs. Yeah. What do they do to keep themselves sane? And so finding out some of the hobbies of some of like people that have like very deadly, dangerous jobs will have hobbies that just seem so out of the ordinary because like was said earlier, it grounds them. It kind of helps them step out of this dangerous world they live in. And so meeting people that do these jobs for a living and, you know, finding out how they can turn on and turn off the emotion that goes with it, or what they do to keep themselves from getting swallowed up by the danger that they live in is pretty interesting. And yeah, because you know, I'm pretty sure we've all done it where you go out and you interview people or, you know, follow along people, and, you know, people love to tell you about their jobs. And so that's been one of the best educations I've had since I became a writer, was getting out and meeting all these people.
Well, and KJ, I think you and John both touched on it, is that sense of coming to a story with a sense, and not necessarily of wonder like you do with science fiction or fantasy, but of a sense of anticipation of, I'm going to learn something and I'm going to get to be that kid again, like John said, where I get to just sit there and be completely engrossed and entertained. And it's so much fun to be amongst authors like y'all, who I think all have managed to do that, where you capture the reader and entertain, and yet have such individual voice, like KJ was saying. It's all of you are very distinct in your writing, which brings me to my last question before we wrap up, which is, what are some authors? Obviously, I love all of y'all's books and would recommend all of you highly, because you've, like I said, kept me up too late, which I think is one of the best recommendations for any author. They kept me up past my bedtime. John, let me start with you. What are some authors that keep you up past your bedtime, that in this field or any other? Who keeps you up past your bedtime?
I'm going to start with the author who penned my favorite novel of all time, which is The Stand. The author is Stephen King. Stephen King is a phenomenal thriller writer, even though no one's ever called him that.
Yeah.
And I'll give you the example that explains why I feel this way. I had gotten to the point in my life and my age and reading and entertainment and pop culture where I didn't think I could be scared anymore by a book or a movie. I didn't think it was possible. I missed that. I missed literally in a cold sweat reading a book like Red Dragon. Thomas Harris is my opinion the best book he ever wrote, unless you count Black Sunday. Red Dragon, far superior in many ways and always to even Silence of the Lambs. So I didn't think I could be scared anymore. Then I read Dr. Sleep, the sequel to The Shining.
That will not only keep you up past your bedtime, it'll make you sleep with the lights on.
And I met Danny Torrance as a grown-up, as a grown-up 30 years after the events at the Overlook Hotel, a broken down man who finds his redemption at long last by helping someone who's just like he was. And she, this young teenage girl, is battling the worst, most vile, terrifying assortment of villains I had ever read. The True Knot. I can't drive past a trailer park anymore and not think of these emotional vampires who travel the country in RVs looking to suck the life out of children. And there are some scenes in that book that are beyond terrifying. And if you watch the movie, the most terrifying scene of all, the one with the murder of the baseball boy, is actually done exactly in the movie the way it was written. My point is,
I wouldn't see the movie. I refuse to see the movie.
Don't. I've warned people about that. But the point is that I said Stephen King because Stephen King, in addition, all those years ago to being one of the guys who made me want to be a writer, can still do something to me that I didn't think any writer could do. And it's what I would like to be able to do to my audience, make them feel what you just said, Jeannie, that comment about, I had nightmares from reading Dr. Sleep and literally could not stop. It's that book you read until you look out and the sun is coming up.
Yep.
Because you're afraid to stop reading until the sun comes up. It is a unique experience. We all remember watching a terrifying movie or an episode of Alfred Hitchcock or The Twilight Zone when you're 5 or 6 years old. You never should have watched it. And you end up that night in your parents' bed because you're terrified, you're shaking, and you're crying.
Well, and it actually speaks to one of the points that a lot of us as writers discuss, is that becoming a writer changes the way you read and changes the way you take in any kind of media. So a lot of times, like, it's hard for me to read a mystery without being able to figure it out very quickly because I write that stuff. So
you know how the tricks, the tricks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there comes a point where my favorite authors in the mystery genre are the ones that I still can't figure it out until they, because most of them I do figure out. It doesn't mean I don't still enjoy them, but I have a couple authors that they're so clever that I finish the book. Oh, that's who did it. And I turn right around and start over again to see where they dropped the crumbs along the way, because I want to learn how they did it.
I do that, Jeannie. I do that in film. It's like,
I'll watch a film over again for that same
watch
reason.
a film like The Sixth Sense or the greatest.
Where did I miss it?
The greatest twist ending in history, The Usual Suspects.
Yeah.
You watch
Actually,
it.
I would say Presumed Innocent, because that was
not
one of the
good one.
very few ones that I was like, wait, what?
You didn't say that at the end of The Usual Suspects?
I did, but I kind of went, yeah, okay, I see it, because I could see it unraveling. But anyway, well, back to the point. LaQuette, what about you? What are some books that still keep you up past your bedtime?
I don't read a lot of romantic suspense. I watch much more romantic suspense or suspense period than I write, I read. I am really into just any type of romance I can get my hands on.
So who's keeping you up past your bedtime?
Naima Simone. Anytime I read her work, I'm just like, why am I doing this? Like, I should just stop because Naima is here. And her books are emotionally gripping. Like, you really feel, it's not just empathy. You really feel what the characters are feeling. And her latest book, Road to Rosebud, that I think it just came out today. I read that as a beta reader maybe last year sometime, and I'm still calling her up. I literally finished the book and I called her up and I said, I don't appreciate the fact that you are trying to break me with this book. I don't I thought we were friends. I don't understand how you could do this to me, because the book is so, I mean, there's so much rich emotion in her writing. And I seek to sort of replicate that in my own writing, where my characters are always big emotion in my books.
And
and
yes,
so
you pull it. You pull it. You do.
Well, thank you. I love any writer who can give me that. So Naima Simone, Adriana Herrera,
Yeah, she's
Tori
wonderful.
Bell. These are people, Reese Ryan, like reading a Reese Ryan book, again, I have to like take a day to sort of emotionally process
right.
what she put me through.
I had to do that with Quanah Jackson's Real Men Knit. I loved the story, and I actually did the same thing. I finished it and went and reread it again, and I was so glad I had done that before I lost a family member not too long after, and I was like, I am so glad I read that beforehand, because that wouldn't have worked.
It's a lot of, but I think that's the mark of a brilliant book, is that you really can feel it's.
Right.
You know, I hear a lot of people talk about craft and, you know, all the things that you're supposed to do. But the truth of the matter is, and this is me as a reader, as a writer, this is me as a former writing professor, I don't really care about any of that. I just care about the feels. So even if you're not so great at crafts per se, but you can get me in my heart.
Yeah.
It's a good experience for me.
Yeah, you got me then. Yeah. KJ, what about you?
I was thinking about the books that have really touched me, and they usually come from a very personal place for the writer, interestingly enough. For example, Karen Dionne's The Marsh King's Daughter was set in the Upper Peninsula in Michigan, where she spent a great deal of her life, and she really hit the mark with that powerful story about father and daughter. And then Andy Gross did a story called The One Man that really resonated with me, and it was also a very personal story connected, I believe, to a family member about the one man who is trying to break into Auschwitz, and so that really stood out for me too. And once again, you know, Sean Cosby's book, very personal, set in Virginia. So I think the books that really resonate with me are when I feel like I'm in the hands of a master and someone who has a lot of authority in that world, because I'm learning things and I feel like I'm becoming that person and living that experience, and it's absolutely breathtaking.
Yeah, I love that. Bobby, what about you?
There's quite a few actually. I'm a big fan of guys like Elmore Leonard or Michael Connolly, who writes the Bosch and the Lincoln Lawyer stuff, which is fantastic. Or Alex Kava, who writes stories about she has an FBI profiler character, and she has a guy that breeds dogs for search and rescue, and they go after killers together, and those are quite well done. And there's a lot of stuff about the dogs. I mean, the dogs are a really big thing. So there's a lot of heartstring pulling with the dogs in those. Or Beverly Connor, who had a couple of who was an archaeologist who was also a medical examiner. So she becomes a medical examiner, but she's got this archaeology background. So they're always having to dig up the bodies, and there's a lot of interesting people that have written stuff like that. And whenever they put out a new book, I'm usually quick to grab it, because I know they're going to be entertaining. But
take you for a good ride.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot more, obviously, but I mean, those are some of the ones they're really good action, or really good thrillers and crime dramas that I enjoy.
What about you, Gary?
Well, I would echo what Kimberly said about Sean's Blacktop Wasteland. This kind of even Sean has talked about sort of this black rural noir that he's composed. And really, I find Blacktop Wasteland are kind of in the lineage of the Jim Thompson stuff. Speaking of films, there's been two versions of Jim Thompson's book, The Getaway, and neither version is the book. The book is just, oh my God, it's bleak without being bleak. I mean, I don't know how to describe it. He doesn't go overboard. He just describes these things. And Doc McCoy and his wife, and they're such strange and twisted, but it's Thompson, so they're just strange and twisted characters. but I remember discovering Thompson at some point. I guess when Black Lizard was reprinting his books, and so I must have been a teenager then, right, or maybe in my 20s. So that's how long ago it's been, and I just devoured them, and as Bobby said, I could read Elmore Leonard. Tana French comes to mind as somebody who very evocative, very deep into her characters, very much this psychological landscape a la Ross McDonald, who was also an influence on me, although you wouldn't necessarily see it in my work. Yeah. And then I guess I'd finish off with, well, of course, there's my buddy Walter Mosley, who he and I kind of share some similar background, and I always get a kick out of Walter's books because they speak so much, I think, about kind of this Black experience in America, but then and the twists with his characters who are all these outsiders. And then, the late, great Donald Westlake, who wrote a series of books about a professional thief called Parker.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And man, those I have to read those books in one sitting. Those books are, I mean, talk about existentialists and just spare and Parker's an amoral character, and the guys he interacts with are even more amoral than Parker. And the brilliant thing I always remarked about, and I've taught a little bit, some now and then, and I've taught his books. The one thing that I thought Westlake always did great with Parker was very little of the books does he describe anything of the internal landscape of Parker. Almost never. Every once in a while, but almost never. It's all external. You understand Parker from exactly what he does, what he says, and how he describes him, right? And it just knocks me out. I always think, man, if you want to know how to write, a la Hemingway and Elmore Leonard, you got to read the Parker books.
And that's another one too that they've never been able to adapt into movies quite right.
Right.
But Gary,
I would say, except for Point Blank with Lee Martin.
I was going to ask. There you go. Gary, that's just what I was going to ask you. What you thought of Point
All the rest of them, you're right. All the rest of them fall short in some way or another. Even the one with Stratham, that got to be, I don't know what that got to be at the end.
Oh my God.
A mess is what it got to be.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is that they adapted them with women. They've adapted them with one. There's one with Jim Brown. Actually, the one with Jim Brown ain't bad. It's called The Split. It's not too bad.
Oh, I've seen that.
So it's all been all over the map. But you're right. I mean, but you're right.
Probably the best.
First one. Yeah.
Probably the best adaptation I've seen of the Parker novels was the Darwin Cook graphic novels.
Yes, that's right.
They're very faithful.
That's right.
Book
and he set them in the 60s. Exactly. He set them in the era when the books were written. When those books were written. That's right. Yeah.
Well, Layla, what about you? What's keeping you up at night? What are you reading?
I mean, it's the relationship and the world building, kind of when they're tied together so well, particularly for romance. And it's a somewhat unusual thing in romance to have the same characters or the same couples going through multiple books. So if I can find them, I'm going to grab them and read them, because I like to sit with my characters, right? I suffered 9 years of Mulder and Scully. So I'm going to sit there and be tortured, right? Fine. So to that, and I will read across, fantasy, sci-fi, urban fantasy, contemporary, whatever. So to that end, and kind of in the thriller romantic suspense vein, Tal Bauer's Executive Office series, really, I didn't sleep a whole lot for a week. That's a Secret Service agent and the president situation, and there was so much going on, right? And that kept me turning the pages. And then Haley Turner's series, particularly the Soulbound series right now, that's the world building is insane. It's so good, and the characters are too. Like, you just want to see, they're so tortured, you just really want them to get there happily ever after eventually when we get there. And then M.A. Grant is that author for me who kind of makes me want to crawl under the table and cry. It's so good. Right. And the first Darkest Court series was fantasy. It was a different couple, but all kind of the same family. And one overarching story. And so kind of wanting to see that. And then I got to beta read her book that's coming out in June. And it's paranormal romantic suspense. Could not put it down.
Oh, that's great.
And it was just the world she is building, the characters and the relationships, not just the main characters either, like those around them. It's addictive.
Yeah.
And
I love those.
I want to be, that totally is me. I just don't want to put it down. And if you can surprise me, which she's managed to do, I'm even more ecstatic.
Yeah, I love those. Well, we have reached the end of our time. I knew that we would love to chat and have such a good time here tonight. And it has been such a great time. So I would like each of you to tell our audience where we can find you on the web, what your latest book is. And let's start with you, Kim.
Sure. So I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and of course my website, all under KJ Howe, very easy to find. And Skyjack here, if you're looking for a little turbulence, since we can't fly anywhere right now, I'm your girl.
There you go. Bobby?
Yes, you can find me. BobbyNash.com is my website. There's links to everything there. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. The Snow series has its own website, abrahamsnow.com. Check it out.
Excellent. Layla?
I am online at laylareyne.com, and all of my socials are at Layla Reyne. My next book, which is the last book in the Fog City series, hence the background, comes out on Monday. It's
sweet.
Book 5. Thank you. And it's Best Friends to Lovers, Cop, and a Digital Assassin. And 14 years of pining, finally coming home to roost. So this was my baby, when I put them on the page together. It was a different couple for books 1 to 3, and when I put these two on the page together, I was like, and that's it, that's the done work, that's the end. I can't wait to get there, and so I'm so excited for it to be out.
So by the time this drops, it will be out, so that'll be great.
Yeah.
What's the title of that one?
Silent Night.
Silent Night. All right. John?
You can find me on, I tweet a lot, never about anything political, always about stuff that nobody seems to care about anymore. Go on Twitter. But you can get me at Jon D. Land there. I'm also on Facebook. I don't do a very good job with my website, so it's johnlandbooks.com. It's snazzy and fancy and moves around, and I never update it. So, but Facebook and Twitter, I'm basically there every day. And you can Google me, and books are available at bookstores. Mostly you have to order them now, unfortunately, but that's not unusual.
And what was your latest? Was a Caitlin Strong one, right?
No, the latest is actually my first in the Capital Crime series, taking over Margaret Truman's mantle. And it's called Murder on the Metro. And one thing about me, when I take over a series, I'll never be accused of doing it the way it was done before.
Red line, orange line, blue line, green line.
Yeah, I always put my own stamp on it. I always take ownership.
Which line on the Metro did you murder somebody on?
Oh, no, this is down in, you know what? I never mentioned what the line is. So we're not going to, I don't know. It's coming from the station, and, there's terrorists.
Pick a line.
By the way,
whichever line you don't like, it's that one.
Yeah, just make it up as you go along.
I'm on the red line, so I hate that one.
It was the red line.
There you go. LaQuette?
You can find me at LaQuette.com. That's LAQUETTE.com. And on Twitter, I am at LaQuette Writes. On Instagram, I am at _Quette. And you can just search me as LaQuette the author on Facebook and find me there as well.
Excellent. And what's Jackson's your newest one, right?
Jackson is my latest release.
Right.
And on May 3rd, I'm re-releasing Under His Protection, which is the book that finaled for the Vivian Awards. So
congratulations.
I'm really that's coming back out. Thank you.
That's outstanding. All right. And Gary?
Oh, my latest I hold up the book is Matthew Henson and the Ice Temple of Harlem. And I take the real life Arctic explorer Matthew Henson and reimagine him as a kind of Indiana Jones, Doc Savage character set in 1928 during the Harlem Renaissance. So we got gangsters, We got Queenie St. Clair, who's one of the boss of the numbers racket, being crowded in by Dutch Schultz from over in the Bronx. I got Nikola Tesla shows up. I got Bessie Coleman, who was America's first black aviatrix, shows up as his buddy in this adventure. And there's there's a lot of fun and daring do that happens. And I'll say real quickly too, I also have a anthology that I've co-edited called Jukes and Tonks. And the only reason I really bring that up is because we do have a great original story by Mr. Sean Cosby in that, which has just come out from Down and Out Books.
Excellent. And where can we find you on the web?
Oh, gdphillips.com is my website. I don't do none of them other things that you kids do. I think I have a Facebook page, and like John just said, I barely keep up my website, if at all, but I do seem to show up on Facebook now and then.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you all very much for being with me tonight. I'm Jeanne Adams. You can find me at jeanneadams.com on pretty much all the social media under Jeanne Adams. And you can find us all on ConTinual, the con that never ends, on Facebook and YouTube. And we look forward to being with you all again. Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.